Yeah, this is kind of a continuation of something Biden has done, at least going back to last fall. His approval ratings are still pretty low. They're like in the 40s, sometimes even the high 30s. So he's taken a strategy a lot of times of just kind of laying back, keeping the pressure off of himself, or pointing the finger at, Trump or MAGA Republicans, which is sort of a Trump surrogate way to wrap other Republicans in with the Trump brand, MAGA Republicans.
Welcome to Reporter's Notebook, where we talk to the Washington Examiner's top journalists about the stories breaking on their beats. I'm Jim Mantle. I'm joined today by White House reporter Hasten Willis. Hasten, the White House has completed its review of the deadly Afghanistan withdrawal. Got some pushback, though, about how they released the summary. What's the controversy?
They got quite a bit of pushback, yeah, both about the report itself, the way it was released, a lot of pushback. So basically it was released only 10 minutes before the briefing started on Thursday. Biden actually left the White House as the briefing was started, and then John Kirby made a pretty long kind of a speech, really. It was pretty drawn out about the report and what was in it and why they did the withdrawal and how they handled it and all this kind of stuff.
Right.
But the press was not very happy about really any of this. They didn't get enough time to review it, just 10 minutes ahead of when the briefing started. And then they did a lot of, well, I don't know if they didn't like, but they had a lot of questions about what was in the report, especially a lot of different things. Probably the biggest thing was that there was a lot of blame placed on the Trump administration. They said they were put in a tight spot by the previous administration, kind of putting the blame elsewhere for the way the withdrawal was handled, even though Biden had been in office for almost 8 months by that point.
Mm-hmm. So there was a lot of questions in terms of, did the administration really do everything they were supposed to do when planning the withdrawal and executing the withdrawal? I think there was broad support for ending the war in Afghanistan by that point. But we're sort of seeing some of the same kinds of criticisms now with this review. There were a lot of criticism about, were they transparent enough? Are they too focused on blaming the previous administration? Is anybody going to be fired or face any kind of consequences for intelligence failures that happened?
Yeah, I mean, there were a lot of very heated moments with a lot of those questions. Yeah, who's going to be fired? Not even is someone, but who's going to be fired,
right.
and that kind of thing. So it was a really tough day for Kirby up there at the podium.
So you mentioned that President Biden left the White House by the time this review was made available to reporters, at least, and made public. There's a broader pattern of the president maybe not having a very busy, a very packed public schedule. At the same time, you're starting to see former President Donald Trump in the news quite a lot. Now, not maybe in the news for the most optimal of reasons. He's been indicted,
yeah.
Which is very unusual for a former president and a current presidential candidate.
Very unusual,
right?
yeah.
It's unprecedented. Mm-hmm. But, in terms of, Trump has benefited in the past from a lot of free media coverage. Is President Biden being sort of strategic in his silence, or what's going on?
Yeah, of course, the White House is not saying anything to that effect officially, but yeah, this is kind of a continuation of something Biden has done, at least going back to last fall. His approval ratings are still pretty low. They're like in the 40s, sometimes even the high 30s. So he's taken a strategy a lot of times of just kind of laying back, keeping the pressure off of himself, or pointing the finger at, Trump or MAGA Republicans, which is sort of a Trump surrogate way to wrap other Republicans in with the Trump brand, MAGA Republicans. And yeah, that's been happening a lot lately. Trump is glad to take the spotlight anytime he gets a chance to. Of course, he flew to New York for his arraignment, and this big Trump-branded plane. I think every single TV station that covers the news was following the plane. Uh-huh. And meanwhile, Biden, he had an event on, I think it was Tuesday, about artificial intelligence, and then went 5 days straight without doing anything publicly. He was actually at the White House Wednesday, but didn't have any public events, and then left for Camp David. It's Holy Week. There's a reason I guess he's doing that, taking a vacation. Even so, probably not a coincidence that he is very much laying low, staying out of the spotlight right now, while Trump is getting all this attention for the indictment.
You mentioned artificial intelligence in the White House event. We've seen Biden, our first octogenarian president, start to lean into some of the tech policy issues and tech regulation debates that are going on. Talk a little bit about what happened with the artificial intelligence.
Yeah, I mean, it's always a little bit awkward when you get into these tech debates when you have these older politicians, which happens a lot. Of people in the Senate are older. But yeah, Biden is 80 years old. Of course, he's the oldest president in history. He's been the oldest president since the day he took office, and is now wading into tech policy policy questions, which would be a little bit tough for him. He's somewhat tech savvy and somewhat not. He has I think an Apple Watch and an iPhone and things like that, like most people have. But he also still reads print newspapers. He struggled to remember the name of the technology Zoom, which is pretty commonly used these days, but he couldn't remember it. Someone finally supplied it for him, and he said it reminds me of this Aretha Franklin song called "Who's Zoomin' Who," which came out in 1985. Yeah, it's a catchy song, but it's pretty old, right? So
At least he was paying her some RESPECT.
Yeah, yes, very clever. Yeah. He seems to like that kind of music. But anyway, so yeah, it's a question of I guess how knowledgeable Biden is about these kinds of issues.
Yeah, I mean, there's a famous quote from I think it was a senator where there was some kind of congressional hearing going on about the internet, and the senator described the internet as a series of tubes.
Yeah, definitely. So the who's zooming who thing might have been Biden's series of tubes moment when it comes to technology. But his administration is weighing in. There's an act called I think it's the Restrict Act that would try to curtail TikTok specifically, because that is very much tied in with the Chinese government. There's a lot of controversy about that right now. Should TikTok be outright banned, or can it be curtailed some other kind of way? There's First Amendment issues with this, civil liberties, are those being infringed? But Biden is weighing in, trying to get the Restrict Act specifically passed.
And there are a lot of youths in today's Democratic Party who love them some TikTok.
Yeah, this issue has been really interesting because it really crosses party lines. There's bipartisan consensus kind of for banning TikTok and being more aggressive about going after big tech, and but there's been a bipartisan backlash. The people who are against it include the Squad members on the left, and actually Fox News host Tucker Carlson. They're actually in alignment on this issue, whereas people kind of in the middle tend to be aligned as well. So really strange bedfellows here. But yeah, like you said, these are young people tend to use TikTok. Rand Paul actually made this point. He had a newsletter, and I think he made a Senate floor speech as well. He said, if we pass this, Republicans are going to lose for a generation, because it's called TikTok, and it's 94 million Americans, and they're mostly young. They don't want us to ban this thing. And, this is not a good idea.
Well, maybe there'll be a government study on who's TikTok and who.
Maybe. I'll look for that.
Thank you, Haston. You can read Haston and the rest of our political team's coverage at washingtonexaminer.com.